Hey, what's up guys, it's Matt with the Movement System. As a doctor of physical therapy and strength coach, I found that a lot of athletes that I work with neglect certain muscle groups that are actually really important for performance. So in this video, I'm going to break down each neglected muscle group and show you my go-to exercises for strengthening it. These movements can increase your mobility, improve your sprinting mechanics, and make you more athletic. So let's dive right into it with neglected muscle group number 1, the serratus anterior. Now this muscle is known as the boxer's muscle, and once you see the anatomy, this will make a lot of sense. The serratus anterior connects the scapula to the rib cage, and it makes this sort of fan shape as it attaches to the upper 8 or 9 ribs. Contracting the serratus anterior muscle produces scapular protraction and upward rotation. And shout out to Muscle in Motion for providing the muscle animations for this video. We're actually about to release an anatomy and biomechanics course in collaboration with Muscle in Motion. So if you're a trainer or coach looking to improve your understanding of anatomy and biomechanics, make sure you join the waitlist in the description below, so that way you'll get the launch discount once it releases. Okay, so now it should make sense though why this is called the boxer's muscle. Because when you throw a punch, you're protracting and upwardly rotating the scapula and training this muscle. Also, boxers tend to be really lean, so you can actually see this muscle. When Conor McGregor made his legendary cut down to 145, you can see how defined his serratus anterior muscle is at weigh-in. Okay, but why is this muscle neglected? Well, the main reason is that whenever you train your pecs, you often retract your shoulder blades. And for bench press or chest fly, that's fine. It actually helps you have a stable base and get a good stretch through the pecs for muscle hypertrophy. However, I see a lot of athletes who only train with shoulder retraction, and over time they actually end up lacking the ability to strongly protract and upwardly rotate the scapula. And after a few years of training this way and neglecting protraction and upward rotation, it can become uncomfortable to get overhead. Often their back ends up really tight, and you'll see that arched lower back as they're trying to reach overhead. The solution though is actually really simple. Just train your serratus anterior. And my go-to exercise for this is the Landmine Press. This is a great way to train the motion of scapular protraction and upward rotation. You can lean forward throughout the motion to gradually improve shoulder flexion mobility, and the half kneeling position allows you to engage your abs and prevent that arching of the lower back. So if you've been neglecting your serratus anterior, work 3 sets of 5 to 8 reps of a landmine press and watch your shoulder mobility and health improve. 2 honorable mention exercises for the serratus anterior would be 1, the yoga push-up, basically doing a push-up into a downward dog. This is definitely a really good one to include in your warm-up, but it's not that heavy, so I wouldn't use it as a primary strength exercise. All right, moving on to neglected muscle group number 2, we have the calves. And the calves are neglected often because the training is sloppy and not really challenging enough. I often see athletes grabbing a 20-pound dumbbell and doing single leg calf raises off the edge of a step, and this just isn't enough weight, and the balance on that step really doesn't allow you to produce the most amount of force. Instead, what I use is the Johnson calf raise. This is invented by a mentor of mine who is an Achilles tendon expert, Chris Johnson. It involves placing the front foot on a box for stability and then placing a heavy barbell on the back. Then you perform a slow, controlled calf raise. This is really beneficial for the calf and the Achilles tendon because having your leg back behind you puts your calf in just enough stretch at the bottom of the repetition. It also reinforces good tall posture and proper running mechanics. The barbell and the front foot stability allows you to load this very heavy and actually make it really challenging. The bottom line is athletes need a strong calf and Achilles tendon. Bent knee calf raises are okay as a secondary calf exercise, but the bent knee position really only allows you to train the soleus muscle. The second calf muscle, the gastrocnemius muscle, crosses both the ankle and the knee joint. So when you bend your knee, it becomes actively insufficient or essentially too short to produce a lot of force. This overall reduces the effectiveness of the bent knee calf raise, especially for the Achilles tendon. So I would really rely on a heavy straight leg calf raise variation to get the most for your athletes. If you implement proper calf training with the Johnson calf raise 2 times per week for 2 to 3 sets of 5 to 8 heavy challenging reps, you'll be on track for improved dorsiflexion, stronger push-off when running, and a more robust Achilles tendon. All right, moving on to neglected muscle group number 3, and this one is the hip flexor. The hip flexor is a muscle group that actually is composed of a few different muscles. The iliopsoas muscle is the main hip flexor. This muscle connects the lumbar spine to the lesser trochanter of the femur and produces most of the force for hip flexion. Tightness of this muscle can contribute to an anterior pelvic tilt position and excessive lumbar lordosis, which can be symptomatic in some individuals. Now, it's important to mention that we also have secondary hip flexors, including the rectus femoris, the sartorius, and the tensor fasciae lata that all contribute to hip flexion as well. Basically, the hip flexor muscle group as a whole needs to be strong but also mobile, and no one really trains them effectively to get both of these things. Oftentimes, if you do see the hip flexors being trained, it's usually not through a full range of motion, especially emphasizing that stretch portion back behind the body. For athletes to sprint well though, you need to have a strong hip flexor, but it is important to strengthen that position because for athletes to sprint well, you need a strong hip flexor to reverse the momentum of the leg behind you. Otherwise, you end up with excessive backside mechanics and not a great point of contact with sprinting underneath your center of mass. So a hip flexor that is either weak or tight can lead to excessive backside mechanics rather than a strong upright posture and forward knee drive. So here's my number one exercise for training the hip flexor. Now I will say that this is a tough setup to get, but it is the best exercise for loading your hip flexor all the way through a position of hip extension. It involves hanging from a bar and then placing one foot on a box or a bench and then driving the opposite knee up. This is particularly effective because it trains the hip flexor through that position of full hip extension. And as we said, whenever you're sprinting, you need the hip flexor to be strong to reverse the momentum of the leg behind the body. Now, you're probably wondering what I'm using to attach the weight to my foot, and that's a perfect time to say a quick thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Animal House Fitness, maker of the Monkeyfeet. Monkeyfeet is the best tool for adding weight to your feet for hamstring curls, leg extensions, abduction, hip flexion, and more at home. The Monkeyfeet attach easily to a dumbbell and then ratchet on sort of like a roller skate. Once you're in, they're super versatile for any exercise that you'd want to do with a weight on your foot. And honestly, I wasted way too much time trying to hook a kettlebell on my foot or wrap bands around a dumbbell and then tie them to my foot. And the exercises just never really felt right. Since I got Monkeyfeet, my hip flexor training has been much more consistent and my hip flexor strength has improved. I even got the Monkeyfeet Pro to quickly change weights for different exercises. So if you're looking for an upgrade to your home gym to expand your options for training, check out Monkeyfeet through the link in the description below. I love partnering with small businesses that make great products, so thanks again to Animal House Fitness. And now back to the video. Okay, now if you don't have the setup for this ideal hip flexor exercise, there are a few really good alternatives. The hip flexor rockback is a great exercise. And for this exercise, you really just need something to anchor your foot to the ground like a heavy weight, and then you hug the opposite knee into the chest. From there, you're gonna rock back slow and controlled, and while you rock back, you should really be thinking about trying to lift your foot up and activate your hip flexor. Basically, this is an eccentric or a lengthening contraction of the hip flexor muscle. It's very similar to a Nordic hamstring curl for the hamstrings. So with just basic equipment, it's a really good way to challenge your hip flexor and build that strength. And then honorable mention will go to the band hip flexor march, but specifically with a band attached behind you, so that way you get into that position of full hip extension. If you work one of these exercises for 3 challenging sets, 2 times a week, you're gonna see your hip flexor strength improve and that carry over to your speed mechanics as well. Okay, now for neglected muscle group number 4, the adductors. Have you ever noticed that your adductors are sore after squatting? Well, studies like this show that the adductors are actually a big contributor to the squat, particularly when squatting deep. In a deep squat, the adductors can contribute over 50% of hip extension force. And this should make a lot of sense when you look at the anatomy. The adductor magnus, for example, is a really big muscle, and it contributes to both adduction and hip extension. If this muscle is weak, it's going to take away from squat strength. And of course, it's not just squat strength, but it's acceleration, change of direction, and other athletic movements as well. So my number one exercise to bring the adductors up is the Copenhagen Plank. This works the entire adductor muscle group. It can be done as an isometric hold in place or dynamically by moving the hips up and down. It can also very easily be progressed or regressed. Placing the knee on a bench or a box is a great way to regress the movement, whereas placing the foot on a box or a bench is going to be the most challenging. And then lastly, if you need to progress beyond that, you can even hold a dumbbell on the top hip, and that can be a really great way to add load and make this a really challenging exercise. Now, we've already said that bringing up your adductors can improve your squat, but it's important to note as well that the other adductor muscles like the adductor longus and the adductor brevis also contribute to hip internal rotation. This provides change of direction strength and also stability of the pelvis during single leg exercises like the Bulgarian split squat. If there's weakness or instability on one leg, it's a good idea to train the often neglected adductors to improve that. Some other great adductor exercises would include a split squat isometric with a foam roller pushing into the wall. This is a really good one that works on pelvic control and that aspect of internal rotation specifically. I've given this to a lot of athletes with limited hip internal rotation and maybe even a pinch in the hip, and it makes their hip feel a lot better afterward. So if that's the case for you, you definitely want to give it a try. And an honorable mention for this one will go to the adductor machine. If your gym has one of these, it can get the job done. All right, now although these aren't specific muscle groups, I do want to mention a few other untrained movement pattern. One, for example, is a forward shin angle. The difference between elite change of direction speed and amateur change of direction speed often comes down to the shin angle and the angle at which you can project your body. Here you can see how an NFL corner changes direction sharply. The shin is able to get basically parallel to the ground with a really low center of mass. This allows for a fast turn of the hips and horizontally directed forces, which are key for accelerating out of turns. You can see that the body angle here that he's projecting at is really efficient. Amateur athletes rounding the cone will have a much higher angle and less horizontally directed force. One piece of being able to get that horizontally directed force is that shin angle. And this can be trained with something simple like a crouched walk, essentially just pushing the knees forward and walking in that low position, or something like split squats or split squat jumps with a relatively narrow base. Basically, there are a lot of options to get that knee forward and work on this. It's just something that's often neglected and not thought about in training, but can have a big carryover to speed mechanics on the field. And I'll give you another one. This one is a little bit more advanced, but it is a neglected motion that I call torsion. It's a little bit complicated, and I can make a whole video on this if you want, but basically it's the ability to rotate the knee in and out like this. This is again a motion that athletes should have access to, but after an ankle sprain or a knee injury, it's often lost and stiff. I've worked with quite a few athletes to restore this torsion motion by actively rotating that knee in and out with the foot anchored to the ground and regaining that torsion motion and mobility. That really helps the ankle and the knee feel less stiff once it's back. And lastly, I'll mention the face pull. This trains the rotator cuff and the rear delt with shoulder external rotation. The rotator cuff is an important stabilizer of the shoulder joint, and I found that incorporating face pulls tends to improve how my clients and athletes' shoulders feel. And again, if you want a full shoulder video, just let me know in the comments. Also, let me know in the comments what muscle group that you think is undertrained if I missed any. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so that way you don't miss any future videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.